It started at the library. My mom had dropped me off there after school so I could work on my history project. It was one of those quiet weekday afternoons, with only a handful of people browsing the shelves or typing on computers. I was sitting at a table near the back, flipping through a book about the Revolutionary War when I first saw her. She was about my age, maybe a year or two older, with long dark hair and bright blue eyes. She wore a hoodie and jeans, casual but neat. "Hi," she said, sliding into the chair across from me without waiting for an invitation. "What are you working on?" I hesitated. It wasn't often that strangers talked to me, but she seemed friendly enough. A project for school," I said, holding up the book. "Cool," she said, leaning forward like she was genuinely interested. "I love history. Do you go to Jefferson High?" I nodded, a little surprised. "Yeah, how'd you know?" She smiled. "Lucky guess. I go to Central, but I've seen you around. You're hard to miss." Something about the way she said it made me uneasy, but I brushed it off. Maybe she was just outgoing. We talked for a while, about school, favorite movies, random things. She had this way of steering the conversation, keeping the focus on me. It felt a little intense, but she was nice enough that I didn't think too much of it. Then she asked, "Do you walk home?" "Not usually," I said. "My mom picks me up." Her face fell, but she quickly covered it with a smile. "Oh, that's good. It's not really safe around here, you know. My mom says you have to be careful, especially after dark." Her tone sent a shiver down my spine. I glanced at the clock. My mom was supposed to pick me up in 15 minutes, but something told me I shouldn't wait here. "I should get going," I said, starting to gather my things. "Oh, I'll walk with you," she said quickly. "Just to the front. It's safer that way." We walked out together, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she was watching me more than she was watching where she was going. When we got to the front steps, I stopped. "This is me," I said, pulling out my phone to call my mom. "Do you need a ride?" she asked, her voice overly casual. "My brother's picking me up in a minute. We can drop you off." "No thanks," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "My mom's on her way." She tilted her head, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Are you sure? She could take a while, and it's getting dark." I shook my head, my hand tightening around my phone. "I'm fine, really." Her expression shifted just for a second. Her smile flattened, and her eyes narrowed ever so slightly. It was quick, but it was enough to make my heart race. I stepped back, pretending to look for my mom's car. "I'll just wait here," I said firmly. She didn't move. "You don't have to be rude, you know," she said, her voice dropping a little. Before I could respond, a black car pulled up to the curb. "There's my brother," she said, pointing. "Are you sure you don't want to ride?" The car door opened, and a man stepped out. He was older, maybe in his late 20s, and he didn't look like her brother. He didn't even glance at her. His eyes were on me. "Come on," she said, grabbing my arm. I jerked away, my heart pounding. "I said no!" Her expression turned cold. "You shouldn't yell," she said quietly. "It makes you look scared." I didn't wait for her to say anything else. I turned and ran, sprinting back into the library. I didn't stop until I reached the front desk, gasping for breath. The librarian looked up, startled. "Are you okay?" "There's a man outside," I said, my voice shaking, "and a girl. They tried to get me into their car." Her eyes widened, and she immediately picked up the phone to call the police. When the officers arrived, the black car was gone. I gave them a description of the girl and the man, but they didn't seem hopeful. "We'll look into it," one of them said, handing me a card. "But you did the right thing by running. Trust your gut next time, okay?" I nodded, still shaken. My mom hugged me tightly when she arrived, and I couldn't stop crying the whole way home. To this day, I don't know what they wanted, or where they were planning to take me. But sometimes when I'm walking alone, I think about her smile, the way it didn't quite reach her eyes, and I wonder if she's out there, waiting for her next friend. I knew I shouldn't have stayed out so late. My friends and I had been hanging out downtown, just wasting time like we always did on Friday nights. The laughter, the music, the lights, it all felt so carefree, like we were invincible. But now, as I sat alone on the nearly empty bus, the weight of the late hour pressed down on me. The city looked different at night. Shadows stretched unnaturally long across the sidewalks, and the streetlights cast an eerie orange glow. I clutched my backpack tightly to my chest, watching the darkened buildings flash by as the bus rumbled along. There were only a few other people on board. A tired-looking woman clutching a grocery bag, an older man snoring softly in his seat, and a figure near the back of the bus, slouched low with a hood pulled over his head. I didn't think much of him at first. My stop was coming up, and as the bus slowed, I pulled the cord to signal. The brakes hissed, and the doors creaked open. The tired woman got off first, disappearing into the shadows. I hesitated for a moment before stepping onto the pavement, the cool night air prickling my skin. The bus pulled away, leaving me alone on the quiet street. It was just a short walk to my apartment, maybe 5 minutes, but the emptiness around me made it feel much longer. As I started walking, I heard footsteps. At first, I thought I was imagining things. I stopped, and the sound stopped too. My heart skipped a beat. I glanced over my shoulder, but the street behind me was empty, just rows of parked cars and shuttered storefronts. I told myself I was being paranoid. It was late and I was tired. I adjusted my backpack and kept walking. But the footsteps started again. This time they were unmistakable. A steady rhythm, not too close but not far enough to dismiss. I quickened my pace, my sneakers slapping against the pavement. The footsteps behind me quickened too. I turned my head sharply, and there he was, the figure from the bus. His hood was still up, his face obscured, but I could feel his gaze locked on me. I forced myself to stay calm, to think logically. Maybe he was just going the same way. Maybe I was overreacting. But my instincts screamed otherwise. I crossed the street, not even bothering to look for cars. The footsteps hesitated for a moment, then followed, louder now. Panic surged through me. My apartment was still 3 blocks away, but every fiber of my being told me I wouldn't make it if I kept walking. I spotted an alley up ahead and darted into it, hoping to lose him. The alley was narrow and dark, the faint glow of a distant streetlight barely illuminating the way. My pulse thundered in my ears as I pressed myself against the rough brick wall, holding my breath. The footsteps slowed, then stopped. For a moment there was silence. Then, a shadow appeared at the mouth of the alley. He stood there, motionless, his head tilted slightly, as if he were listening for me. My stomach churned, and I could barely keep my knees from buckling. "Hey!" a voice called out, breaking the tension. A man on a bicycle was pedaling down the street, his headlight cutting through the dark. The figure at the alley entrance hesitated, then turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. I didn't wait to see where he went. As soon as the cyclist was gone, I bolted, sprinting the rest of the way to my apartment. My lungs burned and my legs felt like jelly, but I didn't stop until I was safely inside, the door locked behind me. For hours I sat in the dark, staring at the peephole, afraid he'd somehow followed me home. I don't take the bus late night anymore. To the guy who chased me into a dark alley, let's not meet again. It was just another boring Friday night in our small town, the kind of place where nothing ever really happens. My best friend Jay and I had decided to kill time the way we usually did, wandering around, talking about nothing, and passing a joint between us. The streets were quiet, the sky heavy with clouds that blotted out the stars. We were walking down Main Street, past the darkened storefronts and the diner that closed early on weeknights. Jay was mid-rant about how his boss at the auto shop was riding him too hard when I saw them. 3 guys standing on the corner up ahead, smoking and laughing too loudly. I didn't think much of it at first. Guys hanging out on a Friday night. But as we got closer, one of them nudged the others and nodded in our direction. "Yo," one of them called out. Jay and I froze for a split second before exchanging a glance. We didn't know these guys, but something about the way they were standing, loose and cocky, made my stomach tighten. The tallest one stepped forward, grinning like he was about to tell us a joke. "You got a light?" Jay, ever the diplomat, pulled his lighter from his pocket. "Yeah, man." Before he could hand it over, the guy snatched it out of his hand. "Thanks," he said, flicking it on and off. His 2 friends moved in closer, their laughter dying out. "You guys look like you've got money," the second guy said, his tone casual but sharp. "Why don't you help us out?" My heart started pounding. "We don't have anything," I said quickly. The third guy, shorter but stockier, smirked. "Oh, come on, you're out here smoking. You've got to have some cash." Jay stepped back slightly, his hands in the air. We're broke, dude. Seriously. The tall one's grin faded. That so? He glanced at my pockets. Empty 'em. I hesitated, trying to think. We weren't far from the park, and there were usually a few people hanging out there. Maybe if we could stall long enough, someone would walk by. Jay, meanwhile, was trying to defuse the situation. Look, we don't want any trouble. Trouble? The stocky one interrupted, stepping closer to Jay. Who said anything about trouble? I felt a bead of sweat roll down my back. My mind raced, trying to figure out a way out of this. We've got like $5 between us, I blurted out. You can have it, okay? The tall guy raised an eyebrow. $5? You think we're out here for $5? Look, man, Jay said, his voice steady but firm. We don't have anything else. If you're going to rob somebody, you're wasting your time with us. For a moment, no one said anything. The tall guy stared at Jay, his eyes narrowing. I could feel my pulse in my throat, and I swore I heard my own breathing, loud and shallow. Then, out of nowhere, the short guy laughed. It wasn't a friendly laugh, it was sharp and mocking. These guys are losers, man, he said to the others. The tall guy held Jay's gaze a second longer before finally shrugging. Yeah, whatever. Keep your $5. He tossed the lighter back to Jay, who caught it awkwardly. They stepped back, still laughing among themselves, as they headed down the street. I didn't breathe until they turned the corner and disappeared. Jay let out a shaky laugh. What the hell was that? I don't know, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. My hands were trembling, and I shoved them into my pockets to hide it. But let's get out of here. We walked quickly, not saying much, until we were far enough away that the tension started to ease. Jay lit another joint, his hands shaking slightly as he held the flame to it. That was close, he muttered, exhaling. Too close, I agreed. We didn't go near Main Street again for weeks. And every time we passed that corner, even in the daylight, I felt that same knot in my stomach, like they were still there, waiting. To the 3 men looking to rob me and my friend, let's not meet again.